we're definitely open to hear what the community has to say and the listeners about that. So that's another thing that we got going on. So, and all right. So what's another thing though? We're kind of, Mustapha, that we're kind of planning on doing in light of changing up some episodes and nothing crazy or whatever. But something that we want to kind of like showcase some dev stories or whatever. Can you share a little bit more insight about what we're looking to kind of, listen to the listeners, so to speak?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we always prioritize, even in kind of our outline or structure for the show, action items and encouraging people to do specific things that are going to help them improve their marketing, improve their strategy, and hopefully overall the success of their game. And so if you're a listener who kind of has been taking heed of those action items and they've worked for you, or even if they haven't worked for you, if the things you haven't worked, like we want to hear from you, kind of share more about your experience, about the game that you've worked on. And we're hoping to have these stories published to the website. So that way other people will be able to view them. Not only does it help to kind of draw more attention to your project, it also allows us to further understand, what facets of our approach to providing action items are working or aren't working, so we can make adjustments accordingly. So yeah, that's going to be accessible soon. I believe we're still kind of working on the landing page, but I think all of that should be available in the show notes for this episode.
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, what we'll probably do is we'll just have a landing page set up so you guys can go, and what that landing page will be is going to be rengenmarketing.com/IGM my story, because that's what we want to hear more about is your story and everything. And we're even open, depending on the story and if we can come up with a format that's conducive with the podcast, of even you having on the podcast and sharing what that story is, because I think it would be really beneficial for the listeners, just to get a kind of firsthand from essentially like one of their peers in a way, about what their experience has been like. Because the honesty behind some of this is sometimes you can hear, the stories and the experience of these guests that have been in the industry and are veterans and everything, but to some extent, we understand too that it doesn't always it's not necessarily. It's great hearing from them and learning from their experiences, but it's also great when you can learn from your peers as well that are kind of like in the trenches and in the same area of what you're doing or where you are in your development cycle and things like that. So that's really what we're trying to get to the bottom of is. Yes, we're going to learn from this as well too. Everybody's going to be learning from it. But to get other individuals that are at the same state that you're in, we thought was going to be really helpful. So if you have those stories, again, that link is rengenmarketing.com/IGM my story. There'll be a quick form to fill out. And then once you do, we can we'll contact you and go further in terms of getting your story, putting that up on the site, and then potentially being a guest on the show to share that with our listeners as well, just so we can learn from each other's successes or even failures, because ultimately those are the things that are going to really help out with the community. So. We got the featured dev stories. Another fun thing that, Mustapha, you and I have been talking about is coming up with an IGM video series. And we're not being really overly creative in the name of this, but it's just going to be called Quick Tips, IGM Quick Tips. And, the reason for this is because, when we're discussing or having our discussions, with our guests and stuff, there's a lot of stuff we do talk about. And while it's centered around a main topic, and then we break some of questions down, there's a lot of either tools or some kind of strategies or tactics we may mention, but we don't necessarily dive down into really deep into them, because to some extent it can kind of get into the weeds and and be a bit cumbersome, especially if visual aids might be necessary to really get the point across and show people how to do these things. So what we were thinking about is basically having this YouTube series that serves as an extension of the show to dive more into some of these tactics, tools, and such that we mentioned. So basically at a very high level, the format's going to look like focusing on something very specific and also outlining a step-by-step process. So, and also being short and sweet. Don't plan on having it be very lengthy or anything like that. And the main reason for that is so on these things that we're talking about, you guys are able to look at the show, get this process down, and easily take action with these things that we've mentioned and everything else. And it just makes it easier because it's kind of all in one place opposed to, because there's a lot of information out there and trying to dig around for it. It's available, it's there, but it can be pretty cumbersome to try to really track down that right answer. And our goal is to give you something that's very quick and easy to follow at a high level. So that's another thing that we're looking to do, which I'm really excited about because I'm actually making videos for once, so it's new and different for me opposed to just having the podcast. So it'll be really interesting. So, all right. And now we have one other thing, and Mustapha, I'll let you kind of introduce this last element here that we have in the works.
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of, I think, the behemoth of the episode. This is the big announcement. As we've mentioned, we've been working on things like trying to get into a bi-weekly release structure, as well as the quick tips, which has kind of a multimedia component, compiling listener feedback, and all of these sorts of things that we're kind of doing to expand into somewhat of a multimedia approach, as well as give just overall more value. So as we kind of transition into making these things more prevalent as a way to kind of help support us in that effort, we actually are looking to launch a Patreon. So it's essentially going to allow listeners who really enjoy the show the opportunity to support us, and potentially that would also kind of allow us to provide exclusive rewards and advantages and such to the listeners who would decide to do so. Of course, the intention is that the show as a whole, and I believe, to my knowledge, everything that we discussed so far, none of that comes at any sort of cost to our listeners. So all of that is still available as you know it to be. We are looking to expand, looking to, hopefully open up more opportunities and provide more for the listener. And so for that reason, we've, created a kind of multi-tiered approach to Patreon, as I'm sure some of you are familiar with, perhaps from other creators that you engage with. And it has all sorts of kind of options and things that you can get into, and I'm sure Andrew will want to go over kind of like the details of the specifics, but to give you a sense of what you might be seeing, it'd be things like a private Discord community for our listeners to have to communicate with each other and with us. Access to kind of insight into our future episodes, the ability to actually provide us with specific questions that might be answered, on a subsequent show, and even some consultation opportunities and things like that for those of you who would maybe like to have a more specific focus on your project. So, all of this is, this is just kind of a broad scope. A lot of these things are available at different tiers of what we're offering. And those details would be available on patreon.com/IGM podcast, which again, I believe we'll try to link in the show notes. But, definitely, check it out. Our objective has, I think, remained the same, which is to give indie developers insight into the ways in which you can market and manage your game, your projects, your community, your team. So, that's still at the forefront of what we want to do. And having people support us on Patreon kind of gives us the opportunity to expand the ways in which we do that and develop a more direct line of communication with you, the listener.
Yeah, and that's a big one for me, too, and for what we've been talking about as well. I mean, obviously, there's the support aspect of all of this and everything that allows us to do a bit more and expand and everything else like that. But the one of the ones I thought was really good was it provides us also with the opportunity and you guys as well as listeners to have directly communicate with each other and providing different areas in which we can do that. And as Mustapha said, we have some private channel Discord access, the ability to suggest or future topics and address questions, things along that line. Because as of now, I mean, yes, we're always open in terms of you can reach out via email and such, but it doesn't necessarily. We felt at least give the proper opportunity where it's more of community involvement opposed to just like an individual coming out and reaching out, to make that suggestion or something like that. Because that's at the forefront too, and what our overall goal is in everything that we're doing is really serving the community, the indie dev community. So we figured a format, like in Patreon, we felt with the offerings that is there and everything, gave us a better opportunity to work directly and communicate directly with you as listeners, as a community. Better than what we were structured and set up as before. So that's another big point, as Mustapha outlined there too. I mean, obviously, yes, the value, giving you guys more value and opportunities on that front, but just being able to communicate in a better fashion, I think it's just going to increase a lot of what you're already getting with the show and stuff. And we strongly felt that Patreon was the right move and the right thing to do so we could have those things happen. So, and as Mustapha said, those 4 tiers, definitely check out the Patreon page, which is patreon.com, IGM Podcasts. And those tiers are labeled as such: IGM Supporter, IGM Member, IGM Collaborator, and an IGM contributor. So a lot of great stuff. Feel that there's definitely options there for everybody, whatever their needs are or interests are and everything. And we're just happy to, regardless if you're able to or not, we're just happy for you as listeners, always tuning in and listening to what we have to share, and also sharing that with others. That's another way to be supportive of the show as well, because as we've said before, this content, we really want to make it for the entire community, and the more you're able to share it, the more you're able to help out your other fellow community members. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're really looking to do is have this helpful content. We enjoy making it. We enjoy talking to the guests. The guests obviously enjoy sharing their insight with you as well. So whatever we can do to continue to share everything that we're doing, I think it's just going to be overall really helpful, and it's just fun to do, right, man?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's an absolute blast, and the guests that we get to speak to and the topics we get to go over, I think everybody knows, especially when you get down into the indie environment, games are always, I would say, among the most passionate mediums. So, it's something we do because we have fun with it. And so, having the listener base and everything like that all means the world. It means that we're doing something right, and that the message that we're conveying, matters to people. But again, that Patreon is just kind of, it is a natural progression of that. It is like, if you like what we're doing already, and it's something that you're able to, help and support, we want to make that worth your while as well. and help give you kind of more of what you're getting at a more advanced level.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that pretty much concludes the update episode. And just to kind of wrap it up real quick, great new line of guests coming up. We mentioned Victoria Tron is going to be